Okay, welcome everyone to our Minority Neuroscience webinar with our guest speaker, Dr. Gaudier-Diaz. This webinar is brought to you by the Vegas project of the Neuroscience Foundation. And I just want to thank you all for being here today. And this is going to be a very exciting event. I want to start off with introducing our team leadership behind hosting this event. So I'll introduce myself first. My name is Ritu Sridatta. I go by Ritu. I am the founder and chief executive officer of the Neuroscience Foundation. I'm currently a neuroscience major at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I'm so excited that you guys are here. And also I'm currently in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. All right, I'm gonna give it over to Catherine.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine. I'm so excited to be here and so excited to see you all come to our webinar. I'm currently a junior at Rutgers University in New Jersey, USA, studying cell biology and neuroscience. So this is right up my alley. I'm currently the president of this great foundation. And if you guys aren't already a part of it, I'll talk a little bit about the opportunities to join with us later.
Awesome. Tavisha.
Hey everyone, my name is Tavisha Sharma and I am a high school senior in India. So I'm in India right now. I am the chairperson of the Vegas project, and this project is basically responsible for creating all the educational resources and content related to neuroscience, psychology, and basically every other field within neuroscience. I am very excited to be here and so happy that all of you are here today.
Thank you so much. Thomas?
Hey guys, I'm Thomas. Currently I am a freshman at Johns Hopkins University studying neuroscience and computer science. And I'm the Vegas Prayer co-chair. So I help out Tavisha with running the Vegas project. So, and as Tavisha said, we run all the educational projects within the Neuroscience Foundation. So.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I also wanted to credit two other teams, the Connectome Project and the Membership and Engagement team, for helping put this event up. So let's get started. Here's a little bit about us. So the Neuroscience Foundation has essentially two main goals: education and service, and membership and mentorship and outreach. So under the education and service umbrella, we have the Vegas project and the Neurogenesis project. The Vegas project is our streamlined education initiative. This is the team that hosts all your educational sessions, summary sheets, book reviews and movie reviews, etc. Our Neurogenesis project is our service initiative. This is the project that enables you to open chapters of the Neuroscience Foundation at your school or university, partner with local free clinics and mobile clinics, and help volunteer and advocate for healthcare for the impoverished and healthcare equity, etc. Under our mentorship and outreach initiative, we have our Connectome project, which is our networking and mentorship project. We reach out to professionals in neuroscience from all over the world to enable a better platform for all of our members to learn from these professionals and connect with them for opportunities. And our membership team is the backbone of this organization. They keep us all together. They keep us engaged with the Neuroscience Foundation. They're the ones who send out our newsletters and create all of our Instagram content for you all to engage with the Neuroscience Foundation. So that's a brief overview about the organization.
Okay, so like I said, there are many ways to get involved with our organization if you aren't already. So as Ritu was talking about, through the Neurogenesis project, you can apply through the link in our Instagram or also our website to open a chapter within the Neurogenesis project in your school or university, or you could do it through your community as well. You could also sign up for the monthly newsletter through our website, The Neurotransmitter, and just get updates about what our organization is doing and what each of our projects, initiatives, how they are going. You could also register as a member for our community of neuropassionates Slack. So there we also just talk about neuroscience news, certain journal articles, and just have great conversations. We are also looking for website designers. So if you have experience using website design or have organization skills or specifically used the Wix website design service, please email us at the neurosciencefoundation@gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you. Also, follow us on all of our social media accounts. That's Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, all at Neuroscience Foundation, to just keep up with what we're doing and just interact with us. And we hope to see you there.
Yeah, so as you may know, I'm the Vegas project co-chair. And so how we publish our educational resources are actually through the website, neurosciencefoundation.org. There will be a tab for finding all of our information, such as like what we do, and also our projects, such as like we post book reviews, and we also have summary and printables, just in case if you're studying for that exam and you need to know what a glial cell is. So great resources there.
Absolutely. Please, whenever you get a minute, go check out our website. There's lots of resources for you guys to engage with there. And it's we're very proud of all the services and all the opportunities that we can offer to you. So without further ado, let's move into introducing our amazing guest speaker today, Dr. Monica Gaudier-Diaz. Dr. Gaudier-Diaz is currently a postdoc fellow at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She teaches a variety of neuroscience courses at UNC. She's completed a Ph.D. in neuroscience and bachelor's in biology, and has a ton of research experience, postdoc research experience in neuroscience. Dr. Gaudier-Diaz today is going to talk to us about her journey through her career, and also what it means to be a minority in neuroscience. So I'm super excited, and I know you all are also excited about everything that Dr. Gaudier-Diaz has to share. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Dr. Gaudier-Diaz. You're on mute.
Thank you. Great. So I was just saying thank you for that sort of kind note, and also for the invitation to come here and present to all of you today. I'm really excited to be here to share a little bit about my journey and the research that I've done over the past several years. And then also it's great to see everything that you all as part of the Neuroscience Foundation are doing to sort of help spread the love and passion for neuroscience. So great job, and I encourage you all to keep it up. So again, my name is Monica Gaudier-Diaz. I did my postdoc at UNC-Chapel Hill, and I've, over the past, I guess, a little bit over a year now, I've transitioned to a teaching assistant professor. So I'm a teaching professor at UNC-Chapel Hill. I've had this position for, again, a little over a year now. And today I'm just going to very quickly walk you through my journey of how I went from, being a little girl interested in nature. And here you see a picture of me with an iguana, and how I developed an interest and love for the field of neuroscience, ultimately obtaining my Ph.D. in neuroscience from The Ohio State University not too long ago. And then how I've then transitioned to my professor position here at UNC-Chapel Hill. And I definitely need a better picture of myself teaching. So this was from last year, teaching remote in this same desk that I'm sitting in right now. But it's been so great to be back in person this semester. So hopefully it's been a transition that everyone's experiencing, and hopefully it's been a positive one for everyone. I'm going to share my sort of personal story, and I want to emphasize that everyone's journey is different. There are many, routes you can take to get to where you'll end up. There's sometimes, you do something, you think you're going to do something, and then you decide to transition. You'll see a little bit of that in my career path. And I just want to emphasize that it's okay, right, for your path to be different than mine. Each of us will have a different path, and we'll embark on a journey that will take, turns and rounds, maybe some of them unexpected, but just note that, keep working hard, and I can assure you that it'll pay off at the end. So I'll tell you a little bit about me and my story using this map. So I was actually born in Birmingham, Alabama, where my parents were going to school at the time. A little bit after I was born, so I was like 6 months at around 6 months of age. My parents got divorced, and then my mom relocated to Puerto Rico, where I grew up and was raised. I stayed in Puerto Rico until completing my bachelor's degree. As Ritu mentioned, I obtained a bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Puerto Rico at Mediates. While I was a college student at my institution, there weren't a lot of research opportunities. So I really did not get involved in research and really didn't consider a career in academia, really didn't even know what grad school was until the summer before my senior year. So I majored in biology with this idea that I was going to be a physician. That's sort of what my family was maybe pushing towards. I also have an older brother and an older cousin who are just a year ahead of me in school. And that's their plan. They're current physicians. One's a pediatrician and the other one's a radiologist. So when I entered college, I was more like, yeah, this is what is expected of me. And I'm just, following the steps of my older brother. And so I declared I majored in biology, and that was sort of my plan. Being so close with my brother and my cousin and realizing that they were so passionate about a career in medicine and I didn't feel the same way, that made me wonder about what were other options for me at that particular time. A friend of mine sort of introduced me to research, and then I applied to summer research programs, and I was able to get in a summer research experience program at the University of Kentucky. And again, that was the summer before my senior year. So happy to chat a little bit more about these summer research opportunities available for students, the benefits of participating in one, if there's questions about that in the Q&A. Again, for me, that was a crucial moment in my life in which this 10-week summer research program introduced me to a career in science, introduced me to the research, all of these, even, outside of being neuroscience. So the program was a research experience in biochemistry. At the time, I knew I was interested in neuroscience, but was open to just trying. And I really wanted to just explore research. So we can talk about the pros and cons of, going through a research opportunity that might not necessarily align with your professional goals and still be an impactful and great experience. After that research program, I decided that I wanted to attend graduate school. However, I felt that I didn't have enough experience and that I really wasn't ready to apply and really get into the programs. I didn't feel my application would be competitive. And so I learned about postbac programs, which again, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about those in the Q&A. I moved to Columbus, Ohio to do a 1-year postbac research program. And there's really where I got my first direct experience with neuroscience research. I enjoyed my time so much in that lab at Ohio State that I ended up deciding to stay there for graduate school. And 4 years after I started my graduate school program, I received my Ph.D. in neuroscience. As a graduate student, I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do for my career in the future. And as I was, doing my research and interacting with students as a TA and as a research mentor to students, I realized that I really enjoyed working with students. And so by the time I was close to graduating, I had recognized that I wanted to pursue a career in teaching, or at least wanted to experience that firsthand in order to sort of test it out as a career option for me. I applied to postdoc programs. So hopefully some of you are familiar with postdoc programs, but once you've completed your graduate degree, so once you obtain a PhD, a lot of people go on to do a postdoc, which is just similar to a residency if you're going the medicine route, and it's just another opportunity for you to train in additional areas. And so for me, when I moved to UNC-Chapel Hill, I moved particularly because I had been admitted to this postdoc program in which I was going to be exposed both to research and teaching. As you'll see when I talk a little bit about the work that I've done, as a graduate student, I conducted research with rodent models or animal models. As part of my postdoc, I wanted to learn how to do research with human subjects. So there was a transition in my area of work. And then also I wanted to get training and experience teaching. And so part of the postdoc program I was in was that I had to receive and participate in classes and training on pedagogical skills. So how to teach, what are the best strategies for teaching. And then I also got the opportunity to teach at a nearby school, which was North Carolina Central University. And that's where I taught my first two courses. One was just a neuroscience course, Introduction to Neuroscience. And then the second one was an upper level course on stress and physiological or biological responses to stress, which is what my sort of research focuses on. So I very quickly walked you through my sort of career path and what's brought me to where I am. Again, you may have questions about the specific steps. I'm happy to address those in the Q&A session. Very quickly say that, right, the two sort of main challenges that I had to face throughout my career path were, number one, having very little or few research opportunities for me to get involved in neuroscience research while I was in Puerto Rico. Again, I really didn't know what research was, wasn't able to get involved with research in my local institution. Therefore, searching for opportunities outside of my local environment, so those summer research programs, was really crucial in my career development. Similarly, and again, another thing that was hard for me was sort of leaving Puerto Rico and having to go to the States, sort of a new place, figuring things out by myself. And for me, that was a personal challenge, particularly because I'm very close to my family. So just having to move and being somewhere apart was tough. Still, I think the love for and the desire to become a neuroscientist and wanting to do or follow my passion, again, sort of allowed me to found the strength to be able to complete my graduate education. And then as I was a graduate student, one of the main challenges that I struggled with was the fact that I was the only person from a minority group in my program. And not only that, I was also the only person whose English wasn't my first language. And so I had a really hard time with, understanding the literature, adjusting to very advanced classes in English where, I still think in Spanish. I still need to translate my thought when I'm writing. And so again, that slowed things a little bit. And again, just following that passion allowed me to push forward through those challenges. And again, happy to address this further in the Q&A session. So why neuroscience, right? What led for me to be interested in neuroscience? And this associates a little bit with my personal history and the fact that, as I mentioned, my parents were divorced when I was very little. My dad lived in Florida as I grew up while I was in Puerto Rico. So I really only saw my dad during little periods of time during the summer and the wintertime. So despite spending very little time with my dad, as I grew up, I started to realize that personality-wise, I was very much like him. And a lot of the times this is attributed to learned behaviors. However, in my case, it didn't felt that way because I wasn't living with him, right, throughout as I was growing up. And so to me, that awakened this interest in understanding the biological basis of behavior. So, right, how is it that even though, I haven't learned these behaviors from you, we have so many things in common. Particularly, one of the things that I do share in common with my dad is the love for the field of neuroscience. My dad is actually a neurologist, so a physician practicing neurology in Florida currently. This is just an image of when I was a graduate student and I went to a conference to present my work. It was a medicine related conference, and my dad's really into sort of neuroscience education and learning still as a practicing physician. And so he actually joined me in that conference. So that's a picture of us in this conference that we both went to. So not only do we share a love for the field of neuroscience and love learning, but we also have a lot of sort of similar personality traits. So what drew me into neuroscience was this idea of understanding the biological processes that associate with behavior. And as you'll see, that deviates a little bit from what I ended up sort of specializing it, but this is really the reason that pushed me to want to study biology and biology and neuroscience. Particularly, neuroscience wasn't a field of study that I could address in my undergraduate institution. However, I felt the need to take a lot of psychology classes to sort of get involved with both the brain and behavior and biological processes. So now I'll transition a little bit to talking about my research interests and the work that I've been doing over the past couple of years. I'll share a little bit of background and then talk a little bit very quickly about some of my graduate school work and then some of the work that I did as a postdoc. So very broadly, my research interests are sort of focused around how social stressors, so environmental factors, can influence behavior, health, and well-being. And I investigate this association by looking into biological or neurobiological mechanisms with a particular focus on how the immune, endocrine, and nervous systems interact. To introduce social stress, note that social stress is defined as this emotional or physical tension derived from a person's relationships with other people or the social environment. And all of us are exposed to social stress pretty much every day, and this can take many different forms. As an example, maybe you can think back to a time in which you were playing by yourself or you saw someone playing by themselves while peers were playing together or studying together. And in an experience like this, it's probable that you or whomever that person was felt socially rejected or lonely in the absence of friends. And this is an example of a social stress experience. Another example is when you have to give a presentation in front of an audience. This could be something as easy as or as simple as, right, this show and tell presentation in school that I would think all of you had to do or experience at some point. It's very likely that while you were presenting, you were thinking about how your peers might be evaluating your performance and kind of judging you. This could elicit social threat, which is a form of social stress as well. Indeed, social rejection and social threat are both examples of social stressors, particularly acute social stressors, right? Those of short duration. There are other forms in which social stress can present itself, and some of these can be chronic or long-lasting. Some examples of these are racism and poverty. Regardless of how a social stressor presents itself, it associates with different bodily changes. Particularly, or to help you understand the process, I want you to think back, if you're in college, maybe at the day that you were taking the SAT. It's likely that you did not sleep well the night before in anticipation to having this very important exam the next day. In addition to that, as you wake up and are getting ready, your heart probably was increasing, you were breathing rapidly, and you maybe even felt butterflies in your stomach. These, together with other physical symptoms of stress, result from the translation of psychological stress to biological processes or physiological processes associated with stress. So how is it that this happened? How is it that social stress can be translated or influence behavioral processes? And here I'll focus on the immune system, which, as you'll see, has been the main target of my research. Particularly, stress activates different systems of our body, one of which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA axis, and also the sympathetic nervous system. Both of these pathways have molecules that they release, or end products, that can influence different cells throughout the body, including immune cells. Particularly, immune cells have receptors that allow for these end products to influence gene expression and activate these different cells. Glucocorticoid is the end product for the HPA axis, and adrenaline is the end product for the sympathetic nervous system activation. And within the brain, microglia, which are the innate immune cells of the central nervous system, have receptors for both glucocorticoids and adrenaline, meaning that in the brain, changes in these molecules can alter these immune cells of the brain. I know someone mentioned glia earlier, and microglia are just one of those glial cells that help support neurons and help nourish the brain. Microglia have been sort of my main interest, particularly as a graduate student, and I spend a lot of time examining how stress could influence microglia. In brief, when microglia are resting, or in the healthy brain, microglia are in a resting state that's characterized by this morphology of a round cell body with processes extending from the cell body. When there's stress present in the system, these microglia can acquire a primed phenotype that changes their morphology and the expression of several receptors. Note that this primed microglia has increased expression of receptor MHC class II. This is just one of the morphological changes associated with priming of microglia. Primed microglia are going to be hypersensitive to immune challenges or to activation from the system. And when presented with a challenge that can activate these cells, the primed cells exert an exaggerated inflammatory response. So again, cells that are resting can become activated. Cells that are primed can become activated. But when you're comparing the response of a resting microglia versus that of a primed microglia, the primed microglia will have an exaggerated response or greater response. In the context of health, an exaggerated inflammatory response is associated with negative consequences. So very quickly, I'll tell you about an experiment I did to examine whether microglia were primed by social stress. Particularly, I had animals that were pair housed or isolated for 1 week. 1 week after implementing the social or isolation protocol, I collected tissue from these animals and I looked at gene expression. So I was looking for the expression of particular molecules. Specifically, one of the molecules I looked at was MHC class II, because I knew that primed microglia are characterized by having an increased expression of MHC class II, or this receptor. Here I'm showing you the results from this experiment, and as you can see, in the isolated animals, there was increased MHC class II relative to the brains of the paired control animals. This suggests that primed microglia, or that social stress, can prime these microglial cells. As I noted earlier, primed microglia have an exaggerated immune response. Therefore, I wanted to examine, are the microglia from the brains of isolated animals exerting an exaggerated response to some sort of immune challenge. I again isolated and paired house animals for a week. After that, animals were exposed to a cardiac arrest or sham procedure, which was the procedure protocol that we utilize to activate the immune system of the animal. So some sort of immune challenge or trigger. Particularly with the cardiac arrest protocol, we stop the hearts of the animals, help or protect the body from peripheral organ damage by inducing hypothermia in the body. And we allow for there to be brain damage within the brain. After this protocol, the animals recovered, and 24 hours later, we collected their brains and conducted a protocol in which we isolate microglial cells from the brain. We then use these cells to look at gene expression of several inflammatory markers, particularly pro-inflammatory cytokines such as IL-6. In this graph, I'm showing you the data for the gene expression of IL-6. The sham groups are animals that were exposed to a similar protocol, only that the heart was not stopped, so they did not experience the cardiac arrest procedure. We have that the paired and isolated sham animals have little to no expression of IL-6. However, when looking at the animals that were exposed to the cardiac arrest procedure, we note that in the isolated animals, there was increased inflammation relative to that of the paired house animals. So when you look at this graph, again, the different letters indicate significant differences or not. You can see that in the brains of isolated animals that were exposed to the cardiac arrest group, there was increased inflammation relative to the sham controls. Relevantly, the paired cardiac arrest group exhibited this intermediate phenotype, which is what you would expect, right? If an animal was exposed to a cardiac arrest procedure, there was damage in the brain, you expect to see an inflammatory response. And again, it seems that, or this data suggests that in the brains of isolated animals, that inflammation or that inflammatory response is exacerbated. And so with this data, hopefully I've convinced you that social stress can act on the brain, particularly to prime these microglial cells. Another important feature of primed microglia is that they can lead to low-grade inflammation, meaning that primed microglia can also release inflammatory molecules. And this is important because in studies looking at the aged brain, primed microglia can induce low-grade inflammation. And this low-grade inflammation is associated with behavioral processes, particularly in the context of aging and stress. Induced inflammation can contribute to cognitive decline or cognitive deficits. Also, stress-induced inflammation can contribute to depressive-like and anxiety-like behaviors, and this is true in both rodents and human studies. And so here I'm summarizing an extensive body of work which provides substantial evidence in support of inflammation-induced behavioral deficits. So why is this important? And I will hopefully will be able to convince you that this is important for all of you who are still sort of students and still for adults like me. Some of the consequences of stress-induced inflammation in students are that stress can lead to inflammation, which can alter behavioral processes, which can negatively impact students' academic performance, right? I talked about how that inflammation can influence or lead to cognitive decline or cognitive impairment. Similarly, stress can lead to inflammation, which can lead to anxiety and depression, which will then also make it harder for students to focus and study. So to put it in a scenario, let's talk about Jane, who's this little girl here who's being bullied in school. As a result of the bullying, her biological response could be this activation or priming of microglia, right? Bullying is a form of social stress. This can impact behavior. It'll probably make her feel sad and depressed, which can then associate or impact academic performance. And now on my next couple of slides, I'm going to show you some of the studies that I did while as a postdoc at UNC, examining particularly low grades, among populations that are exposed to social stressors. And particularly, I investigated this on students from low socioeconomic status backgrounds. And in my studies, low socioeconomic status background was determined by generation in college. So I was looking at students who were first generation college students versus students who were continuing generation college students. So I did a nationwide survey, particularly among neuroscience majors, where I assessed academic performance, measuring or asking about their GPA. And I also asked about students' anxiety levels. I was curious to see whether anxiety could mediate the association between low grades and first generation college students. Particularly here, I'm showing you a graph with regards to the grade point average. And even though it's a small difference, it was still statistically significant, where individuals from low socioeconomic status, particularly students who were first generation college students, had a slightly, or in this case, significantly lower GPA than students from high socioeconomic status. These findings really reiterate a lot of what's been already published in the literature, looking at this association between socioeconomic status. Again, particularly, it's data showing that individuals that are first generation college students tend to obtain lower grades relative to continuing generation college students. As I mentioned, I was interested in why is this? And so to try to explain why, I asked about anxiety. When looking at both trait and test anxiety, I found that individuals from low socioeconomic status, again, individuals who are first generation college students, they expressed or reported higher test anxiety and higher trait anxiety, meaning that these first generation college students are experiencing more anxiety than students who are continuing generation college students. I did a little bit of mediation analysis, particularly analysis or statistical analysis, to explore, is the association between socioeconomic status and grade point average mediator sort of controlled by these anxiety measures? And the effect was significant for both, suggesting that both test anxiety and trait anxiety, so this anxiety felt by individuals who are first generation college students, account in part for this association between first generation college students and lower grades. So this suggests to me, right, that it's important to try to attenuate anxiety among students, particularly of those who are from vulnerable groups, particularly those who are first generation college students, based on the data that I've presented. So how can we attenuate stress and anxiety in students? You might think, oh, that's easy. Let's just have them take SSRIs or some sort of medication that can either attenuate the inflammation or that can attenuate their stress levels, right? And then that's going to be beneficial. I want to present to you an alternative, right? So medications can be expensive, and there's also no way of verifying compliance that individuals are taking this medication. I suggest that an alternative is these social interventions. So social interventions that can target different variables that may also be important for reducing anxiety among first generation college students. So in my opinion, medications are not necessarily the way to go. Instead, we should try to target these social interventions. And I'm particularly interested in belongingness as a potential target of intervention. Particularly in the 1960s, it was reported that the human need of belonging can be predictive of educational outcomes, where students that feel like they belong in the environment, in the school environment or college environment, tend to obtain higher grades. Data from recent studies support that students who feel connected to their peers and their environment can obtain higher grades than those who lack a sense of belongingness. So as a potential target of intervention, right, we can address belongingness in hopes to reduce inflammation and anxiety among students, therefore improving their behavior, health, and well-being. And again, belongingness is just one example or a potential mechanism or potential target of intervention. There could be others. Belongingness is just one that's of particular interest to me, which is why I've summarized it today. So hopefully you've enjoyed my presentation. Again, I very quickly walked you through a little bit of my background and my academic journey, and then very quickly walked you through some of the research that I've been doing, particularly exploring social stress and how it influences behavior via different mechanisms. So I am appreciative of y'all's invitation, so the invitation from the Neuroscience Foundation to be here, for all of you for your attention. And there's my email, like I'm happy to answer questions now, but also if you think of something or feel like you need advice in the future, like please feel free to reach out. I'm usually pretty responsive to email and always willing to help students sort of try to identify, what's the right thing to do, or help point you in the right direction, if that's ever helpful. So thanks again, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much for that very, very informational and insightful talk, Dr. Gaudier-Diaz. I've known you for a bit, but it's just felt like I still learned so much, so many new things today, and I'm sure everybody will agree with me on that. So I want to open up for Q&A session. So we're going to start off with some pre-submitted questions that our attendees submitted before this event. And if you all have any questions, please put it in the chat, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. All right, I'm going to hand it over to the Vegas project chairs.
Should I stop sharing my screen, or should I leave this open? With me?
You can, I'll put your email in the chat so they can get that. But yeah, this works. Okay.
Perfect.
Thomas, Tavisha, you guys can take it from here.
And if it's okay, I'll very quickly respond to the question on the chat. So what does studying neuroscience look like at UNC? Specifically, if you intend to go to medical school, I will say I think the majority of our neuroscience majors at UNC-Chapel Hill intend or plan to going to medical school. So they're majoring in neuroscience, but are also on the pre-med track. And particularly the program at UNC, one of the very nice things about it is that it gives students flexibility with regards to the electives that you take. So for the major, you have to meet or take a series of knowledge electives and a series of math and methods electives. However, there's a lot of liberty in which what are going to be the knowledge electives that you choose to take. And some of them are in neuroscience, but then there's also others in biology or the computational department, like computer sciences department and so forth. So a very nice thing about the program at UNC particularly is that it gives you flexibility to tailor your major based on your interest. And I think that's one thing that students who are on the pre-med track are appreciative of, because it gives them some flexibility to choose.
Yes, I do want to second that, because I am a neuroscience major at UNC, and it truly does give you a lot of flexibility. Our choice of electives is very, very vast, and it has a lot of variety. So you will 100% find something you're interested in doing. And you can also craft your own concentration through your electives, which I really appreciate. So it's an incredible university with incredible professors and teaching staff who are also involved in their own research. So it's truly a very, very unique experience to study neuroscience at UNC as a pre-med.
All right, cool. So we're going to start on some pre-prepared questions. So the first question we got was, how do you think we should increase diversity within the neuroscience field if you feel like there's not enough diversity yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting there. It's on the right direction. And this is not something, well, I guess I am sort of involved in different ways. I think the field as a whole has done a really great job promoting and supporting students from minority backgrounds. So there's, through the Society for Neuroscience, which is the big sort of oh my God, I'm blanking out, like professional association for individuals in neuroscience. There's a program called the Neuroscience Program Scholars. And through that program, it's selective for individuals who are of some sort of diverse or underrepresented background. And the neuroscience program offers these sort of training methods. So particularly, I was a fellow in the neuroscience program, and I was assigned a mentor who helped me for 2 years. And then I am currently now serving as a mentor to a graduate student in this program. So it's exclusive for, I believe, graduate students and postdocs, but I do think that programs like that support and embrace diversity are a great way to, help students recognize and give them the support that they need, particularly graduate students. For me, as a professor in an institution like UNC-Chapel Hill, I try to do this by one, setting the example, of course, but then also I have an activity in my class where I have students search for neuroscientists who are doing research and who come from diverse backgrounds. So it's called the Neuroscience Spotlight Group Project. And that's one of the ways in which I hope that students recognize, anyone can be a neuroscientist, and to help to feel supported, or to embrace the individuals who are doing that work. There's also a community that started, it's called Black in Neuro, another group for spotlighting and focusing and supporting individuals who are from, again, underrepresented groups in the field. And you can definitely see when you go to something like the Society for Neuroscience that neuroscience is a diverse field, and it supports individuals from underrepresented backgrounds. And again, there's a lot of little things that we as individuals can do to support that, if that hopefully answers the question.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next question that we got was, what do you hope to see from neuroscience in the next 10 years, considering you have been in the field for so many years? So what do you hope to see, something interesting, something new in the next 10 years?
I'm thinking, I think that's a great question. I guess just like in general, something that I would like to see change within the field of neuroscience, which may be a challenge, but a lot of the times as someone who teaches introduction to neuroscience, right, I think in the textbooks used to teach neuroscience, it focuses so much, right, on work that's been done years and years ago. And so I would like to see those intro to neuroscience textbooks start to implement a little bit of, more novel techniques, and so that we can offer our introductory students a taste of what neuroscience is really like. Another thing, and this has to do with maybe my personal experience, it hurts me to teach introduction to neuroscience and to very rarely mention glial cells. So I understand how neurons are the basic unit of the nervous system, and we spend so much talking about them in that introduction to neuroscience course. However, the brain cannot function without these glial cells. And as someone who studied glial cells myself, particularly these microglial cells, I feel very passionate about, every neuroscience major needs to learn so much more about glial cells than what we teach at Intro to Neuroscience. So maybe that's just another thing. And I've focused my response on sort of, the educational aspect, because that's where I'm mostly involved in. I think there's research-wise, there's so much more that I'd like to see happen, particularly in the context of different illnesses, right? To me, it's crazy that there's no way to treat something like Alzheimer's disease, right? So we could go down that loophole, but I'll leave my response to, the things that I'd like to see maybe like in the educational context.
Yeah, kind of going off of what you said, I remember during a presentation you mentioned about the correlation between an increase in stress and a decrease in academic performance. And you would think that it's intuitive for educational institutions to implement the learning from that kind of research into the educational system. but that's very rarely the case. So, you know, as somebody who's hoping to go into the field of neuroscience, I definitely agree that there's a lot of like actual incorporation of all the research that needs to be done into everyday life and everyday institution activities and things like that. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for your response, and thank you, Ritu, for that add-ons.
All right. Our next question, I know you touched on this briefly, but what were like the main factors in really like changing your decision from going from pre-med at the University of Puerto Rico to just going to grad school and focusing on like just like neuroscience research and stuff? Because I know you told us that your dad was also a neurologist. So.
Yeah, so I mean, I think really for me, it was being exposed to research. So I now, as a professor, like in my role, whenever I talk to students, I'm always like, get involved in research, like try it out. And even if you decide, you know, research is not for you, there's so much that can be gained out of being involved in research. Like there's so many skills that you can gain that will help you regardless of the career path that you choose. So I highly encourage you to, you know, as you're a student or particularly in college, to get involved with some sort of research experience. So for me, that was really it. And like, I actually didn't know, which I think, right, you're just hearing from me. So you know about graduate school, you know, the path potentially someone has to follow in order to be a professor at a university. I didn't know that, right? Like I had no idea what that was or like what my professor's career paths had looked like. I didn't even know what graduate school was because my family was very focused on like professional degrees. Like I come from a very like well-educated family, so privileged in that way. However, I'm the first one in my family to get a PhD or like to attend graduate school. They all went to college, but they went through like professional degrees, which, right, great for them, but I just didn't know what these other options were. So explore your options and really, you know, test things out. And again, you know, just for me, it was doing research, like learning what it was, learning about it, exposing myself to it is again what helped me realize. So like, I love this of trying to like understand something that no one knows the answer to, right? Like that's just so much fun. At least it was for me.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, so before moving on to the next question, Ritu has just dropped another question in the chat. So would you like to answer that first?
Yeah, so can you talk about the summer research experience opportunities that you mentioned earlier and how to get involved? So great question, and I'm always so excited to talk about this. So there's a series of universities that have these summer programs. There's a collection of them called like Research Experience for Undergraduates, or REUs. And a lot of different institutions have REUs, particularly for different areas or different programs. And so they're advertised, they're sponsored by the National Science Foundation or NSF. There's also some that come from NIH, but I'll talk particularly about the REUs because those are the ones I'm most familiar with. So institutions get funding to host these programs. And so the REU that I participated on was at the University of Kentucky. It was under their program of biochemistry. And so these programs are out there. You can apply, you know, write a statement, and how they function is that they assign you a research mentor. You go to that institution for 10 weeks during the summer and you get involved with research, where a lot of the times it involves some sort of professional development activities. It involves, so we had like journal club meetings every week with the people in the, you know, the cohort of the summer program. All of us worked on individual research labs and had individual projects that we were working on. At the end, there's presentation, so you have to create a poster and present your research. So for undergraduate students, it's a great opportunity to get exposed to research, go to a different place, right? So you can go to different institutions other than the one you're currently at. And a lot of these programs, they are sort of focused for students who are interested in doing or pursuing a PhD in X or Y field. And a lot of them support students from underrepresented backgrounds. I don't know if there's any specific questions about it. I'm happy to address them, but that was like a quick overview.
Thank you so much. That was pretty helpful.
Okay, so the next question that we had was that what was the most challenging part of choosing post-grad career path? Like, what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I mean, I briefly mentioned this earlier. Like, I think for me, the hardest thing was just leaving Puerto Rico. And again, that's sort of more personal. Like, I think culturally, Puerto Ricans, or at least the way I was raised, like I was super close to my family. Because Puerto Rico is so small, a lot of the times here, like this was my case, I went to school 20 minutes away from where I live. So I was a college student and I lived at home with my parents. So just taking this step or the courage to, leave, go to a new place by myself. Not only that, but like I come from a really close family where like my grandparents and my aunt like lived in the same neighborhood. We would see each other like every other day. So just leaving that, I think, was the hardest thing for me, which, right, technologies made it easier. But it was still very hard to, face them and be like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm moving, I'm leaving. And to not be present for, everyone's birthday and that sort of thing. Like personally, that was very challenging, and it still is sometimes. Going, I guess, focusing more on the path in itself and less of it being personal. I think it was very stressful to compare myself to others in graduate school. And I feel like I'm generally very tough on myself. And so it was really frustrating to go study with a group and like everyone read the paper in like 10 minutes and it took me an hour. Like that was, I think, so frustrating. And like me not being familiar with some words, particularly scientific words, like having to translate them and look for the definition. So that communication barrier was really tough for me personally. And just the fact that I kept like comparing myself. And that's why I wanted to make the point of like everyone's journey is different. And that was my challenge, and it may not be the same challenge you all experience. However, you will probably experience a different challenge, right? And so making that, like bringing that up in a context like today, I think it's really important. And so again, those were, I think, the biggest things for me.
Thank you so much for answering that. Like, I think that communication thing that you said, that must have been very hard. And of course, moving away from family is definitely a very difficult thing for everyone.
Catherine Mancada has her hand up, so we're gonna ask a question.
First, I want to say thank you for sharing with us today. And I think this webinar was very fitted because Hispanic Heritage Month just started. So it was great. I just wanted to ask, because this is something that I feel myself when I'm studying, because I want to share what I learned with as much people as possible. I translate and learn it again in Spanish and French. So did that happen to you while you were learning as well? Did you wanted to translate everything just to be able to share it in your other language?
Yeah, so definitely one thing that happened, and it's actually a skill that I think really helped me, or really still helps me in my current job, right? So not only did I have to translate language-wise, it was like I have to explain this to my grandmother who has a college degree in math, right? So very different. And to my grandfather, who's a lawyer, and again, knows very little biology. So wanting to share what I was doing with my family because of that strong connection helped me be a better science communicator. And I think helps me be a better professor and educator because, right, sometimes what I'm, when I'm just summarizing my research and I'm talking to my defense committee versus when I'm talking to my students, the language I need to use is very different, right? And so I think that that's one thing that, yes, I did that. And not only it helped me, translate science, but also, maybe this is going to sound bad, but like it helped me dumb it down to, my grandparents so that they could, understand what I was doing. And that's something that has helped me become better at my job, which is to teach students who, come into this introductory class not knowing anything about like neuroscience sometimes.
Thank you. That was great.
All right, awesome. So I think we're going to end it off the questions. So I'll just conclude today's webinar. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Dr. Monica Gaudier-Diaz, for speaking. It was great listening to your talk. I loved your life story and how you got into neuroscience. It was really fascinating. And yeah, if you have any questions about neuroscience, or the Neuroscience Foundation, or more questions for Dr. Monica Gaudier-Diaz, please email us. And she also just sent her email, gaudier@unc.edu. Please use that email if you have any questions for her or you would like to stay in touch with her. So thank you, everybody. And yeah, have a great day.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.